Okay, so we do have a finished image here. This one's just for demo purposes, still fairly rough around the edges. And what we want to start looking at is adding our annotations for this. So this could include stuff like directional arrows and camera movements and any other annotations that we want to do. Now, I usually like putting my camera annotations in a slightly different color, given that these are all grayscale. A little bit of color might help us visualize that. And I also like having them on a separate layer. So we've got our line work, our shading, and our flatting. I'm going to create a new layer above here. And let's just call this cam move, like so. Now I'm going to run through a few options with this. I'm going to select maybe something like a bright red, and I'm going to use a brush. Now with this, I would actually kind of tend to lead towards the pencil again, as opposed to the brush tool, because we do want some nice solid lines. But instead I'm going to stick with the brush tool. I'm going to click up here and I'm going to go for something like the hard round brush, like so. Again, you want to get something that's going to be a decent brush size. And let's just say we're going to do a shot where, let's frame it up. So a couple of options. So shift key again, click and drag. It's going to allow me to draw a straight line. I'm then going to go unclick, hold down shift again, and then drag down. And this is just going to help me frame my first shot. And I do want it nice and neat. If we go too far like I did then, just do it again. And that kind of works. So let's just say we're going to sort of dolly in or zoom in, maybe to the fish here. Then I'm just going to draw another box and reframe. And make sure you don't get your lines too big. These are fairly chunky for demo purposes, but I'll probably use something even a little bit smaller for that. And then maybe what I want to do is say, okay, well, we're going from point A to point B. I'm going to click, then move to the next point, hold down shift and click again, and then I maybe draw a little arrowhead on there. And let's do the same for there. It's kind of messing up my image, which is why I like to have these on a separate layer. And you may wish to write in A and B, for example, if it's unclear, and potentially even write in zoom or dolly, depending on what technique you want to use. Now, writing with a mouse, as you can see, is tricky. So rather than having scruffy looking writing, do use the text option. You can click in, you can choose the color that you want for the text. You've got all different styles and that, and you've got different sizes over here. So you can just click in, and I might want to write in zoom, for example. When you've finished this, you can either use the click on the arrow key, or let's click on that again, or click in there and or hit the tick key or the cross key. If you need to adjust that, again, text, I can double click in there and I can manually go in and increase the font size or the font type or whatever from there. Other option is Control T will transform, or edit free transform, and I can grab that and start scaling it. Now, quick tip for this, hold down shift as you're scaling, and that will constrain the proportion so it doesn't get all stretched out, and we might want to place that in fairly subtly to there. I now have zoom in there, and I have my movements in there. I'm going to shift select on both of those layers. I'm going to right click and go to merge layers. That way it's down to one particular shot there, and now I can adjust the opacity if I want, and so it's not as obvious for the particular shot there. So we've got some options there. I'm going to show you a couple more with this as well. So I'm going to turn that one off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in to this tool here. Now this is going to do some custom shapes, and I'm specifically going to go for the rectangle tool in this instance, and this will allow me to click and drag and create a rectangle. It will bring up the properties panel here, but we can also access the property panel up the top here. Most of the things are going to be the same as well, and if we make sure we select it on the shape there, that will allow. Now you'll notice it says fill, and that's going to be the fill color. Yours might be different. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to go for the white square with the line through it, which is going to mean it's going to be invisible. And I'm going to go to stroke, which is essentially the line on the outside, and I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to make that red. I'm going to increase the pixel size, and mine's set for dots for some reason, but let's make that a solid line, and this way we can adjust there. Now the stroke is based on pixel size, so if your image is fairly high res, you're going to need more pixels to get a thicker line, but that's pretty good. And click out again, and we've got our rectangular shape here. If we don't like what it is, Control T to duplicate, and again we can scale or do whatever we want with that. From here we've got a couple of options. We can now click and so just apply that, and I'm going to close this properties panel because it is up the top here, and we can maybe draw another one, and hooray, we've got a new shape here that we can easily move around and all that. Just a quick word of warning as well with this. By default, with the move tool on, auto select is usually on, and what that allows you to do is whatever layer you click on, it will select, which typically seems quite handy, but it can get very annoying sometimes. You think you're moving something and it's moving something else, and it messes things up. So what I typically do is untick that, so that way I can select on one particular object and move that around without accidentally clicking on something else. If I do want to access the auto select, I don't have to click up here all the time. I simply hold down Control or Command on Mac, and that will allow me to access turning that on briefly, and then I can click on an object and it will jump between those. So much better way of doing it than having the auto one selected on, and then move that there. So this gives us some nice rectangles. We can rotate them if we wanted to, or anything like that. And I'm going to show you another option as well, and that is jumping in here, and I'm going to go to the custom shape tool, and up here we have some options for shapes, and I'm going to click in here. There's a little cog here. I'm already on the arrows, but you may have it something else. We've got stuff like animals, and it's going to say replace or append. If I go replace, it's going to get rid of those, or append is going to add them on, so I go replace. And we've got dogs and cats and all sorts of weird stuff, but I really want the arrows, so I'm going to jump in, hit the cog, and go to arrows, and I'm going to hit OK again. And here we have a selection of arrows that we might be able to use for this, and there it is there. Let's click out of there, and I'm going to simply draw an arrow for that, like so. And for this I might add a fill to it. Control T to transform, and now I can move it into place. Control T, rotate, scale, etc., etc. Just as a quick word of warning for this, these smart shapes are pretty good in the sense that they're editable. If I click on the smart shape icon, you can see these are vector points, and without getting too complicated, I can move these points around specifically using this tool here. This is the shortcut is A, path selection tool, or the direct selection tool for individual points. So the white arrow here, and I can shift click on multiple points here, and I can drag that tail end around, for example, or click on an individual point and stretch it out. So there is quite a few options with this. You can shift to select multiple, and Control to deselect, for example, and I can start moving this arrow around if need be, or select a whole bunch of them and start playing around with that. So there we have it. A couple of options there, obviously. So using arrows, using the shift key and some line tools, and really trying to get a nice neat shape, and select and merge those layers, for example, and just drop the opacity. So lots of options there for annotating storyboard, and I do typically keep these separate, so if you do want to have a nice neat image, great. And here's one with a line image. So once again, save that out, export if need be as well, and we'll see you in the next video.